Pavlich, okay? Host of NewsNation's Katie Pavlich tonight. Katie, thank you so much for coming on. Great interview.
Thanks for having me.
I was watching it the entire time. What was your main takeaway from your interview? And by the way, I know you have part 2 tomorrow.
Yeah, so the main takeaway is that the president doesn't take a lot of time to let the accomplishments that he even brought to the briefing and to our interview today breathe a little bit. They're constantly working on the next thing. We talked to him about what he expects for Congress this year. Last year, of course, he put the big, beautiful bill on the agenda, wanted it passed by the middle of the summer, and Congress was able to do that. So I asked him about his agenda items for this year, and it was interesting to hear him talk about wanting his executive orders codified into law, which does 2 things. It allows them to be long-lasting, but also solidifies much of his legacy in terms of the kind of policy positions that he put in place through his power in the executive branch, which could be reversed by the next president or by Democrats who want to vote against or take down some of these executive orders. So very interesting. Also got into a lot of current events with him about the Insurrection Act, whether he would deploy that as we're seeing more unrest in Minnesota. And of course, world events as he's headed to Davos, Greenland being a huge contentious point of debate there, and Europeans claiming that they're not going to give it up. So really interesting to talk to him about all these issues from his first year. Of course, it's his 5th year in the Oval Office and moving forward to the next year on the world stage and here on the home front.
Yeah, you mentioned legacy. I mean, he said he wants to go down as a great president for a variety of reasons. You mentioned the Insurrection Act. I'm really glad you mentioned that with him because obviously this would allow the president to deploy military troops inside the U.S. to potentially carry out law enforcement duties. It's still a question if he would do it. I want to just play a bit of your interview and get your take on it.
It's something I would have no problem doing if I think we needed it. We have great people at ICE. They're strong people, they're smart people, and I don't think it's necessary yet.
He seemed kind of cautious, right? I mean, what do you think, after speaking with him, what do you think it would take for him to really think about invoking that?
Well, he did say that it's not out of the ordinary for presidents to invoke it, and that is correct. A number of presidents have invoked the Insurrection Act for a number of reasons throughout the course of our history, but he seems, a little tepid to do it, allowing his officers to work inside of these cities, seeing if he can develop some kind of rapport with local law enforcement through DHS to get things under control. But he said he doesn't feel like he needs to do it now, but it's not off the table if these local officials can't enforce or allow the federal government to come in to enforce the law, because of course the Insurrection Act is for situations where the federal law is being impeded, and one could argue that's exactly what's happening in Minnesota and sanctuary cities all across the country.
And by the way, I mean, again, just to reiterate our audience, we're carefully monitoring what's happening with the president's plane, Air Force One. It had to turn around as it was on its way to Davos. It seems to be just a mechanical issue. But, I mean, Greenland's a big part of this. You talked to him a lot about why he wants Greenland, how far he would go to take it. I said there's a lot of talk about whether or not he would impose tariffs, 10% now, 25% maybe in June. Let's play a quick bit of your interview on that.
In a location that is very important for our national security and also for the international security of the world, literally. It's a very big piece of land. It's really cold, got a lot of ice on it. So it's not like we're going to build a nice real estate development or anything.
No golf course on Greenland?
I don't see a golf course.
All right. How badly do you think he wants it? What's he going to do?
He wants it for the sake of national security and defense, and it's all about the way that we fight modern warfare with missiles flying across continents. And so he's trying to defend the United States and the world from that with deterrence through the Golden Dome, which he believes they can build part of it on Greenland. And just generally speaking, the geopolitical situation in the region, Russia's got a lot of military bases all around the Arctic. You had the Chinese in 2018 starting to call themselves a near Arctic country, and yet you have the NATO Secretary General just recently saying that they started to beef up Arctic defense in 2025. That was less than a month ago. So NATO is far behind. The president sees the writing on the wall for modern warfare, and he believes that, look, Greenland is a strategic asset the United States needs for the sake of not just the United States, but protection of the world.
All right, we'll see what happens in Davos, and I know what I'm going to be doing, watching part 2 of your interview with the president tomorrow.
See you
Katie
tomorrow
Pavlich,
night.
great
Thank
work.
you.
Thank you. All right, and be sure to watch Katie Pavlich's new show, Weeknights, 10 Eastern, right here on NewsNation. And now we got Chris Cuomo from Cuomo. Good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on my show.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Your takeaway from the interview Katie had with the president.
I think it's all about a matter of perspective, and it's all about the midterms. And you can always point to metrics that are useful for your cause in politics. It's about how the people feel. Perception is reality. And this is a dark mood in this country. Some of that is because of the president. Some of it is done in reaction to the president. But I think there's a lot of wood to chop in year two.
Yeah, no, and by the way, I encourage everybody to watch your program as well. I mean, you're opening about exactly what was at stake and what might be the wins or things to think about for the president. It was really, really informative. Let's just stick with Greenland for a second since this is happening. Obviously, we understand what the benefit would be, right? We're dealing in a very unstable time, and you talk about missile defense, you talk about having the ability to have vessels in those routes. How far do you think he's willing to take this in terms of tariffs? And by the way, now Europe is saying they'll have a trade bazooka in response potentially, where they would eliminate businesses from doing, investment in those countries. How far do you think he's willing to take this?
Never know. I mean, that is the wild card for the president, right? Is that you don't know what he's willing to do or not do. Some people see that as a strength, others as a weakness. I listened to Katie, I listened to the conversation. I have no idea why Greenland is being approached this way. Every argument they're making, there is no golden dome. There's no gold in anything. There was never any Star Wars. These were myths. They never became anything in terms of instrumentation. If you want to use Greenland, why wouldn't you just do it through your alliance and through NATO? Why does he have to own it? It doesn't make any sense, and I don't think there's any chance it happens.
In your opening today, you mentioned how health insurance, you talk about the economy, you can talk about GDP, you can talk about inflation, you can talk about grocery prices. You said health insurance is something the president should really focus on going into the next year. Why?
Because that's what he promised. America first. We got big problems at home. People can't get ahead. He's supposed to be a populist. Healthcare, the cost structure, I'm going to give you a healthcare savings account. If I put $5 in this pocket or in that pocket, what difference does it make if I'm charging you $7? You know what I'm saying? If you want to deal with what it costs, go after those guys. One of the best things I've heard the president say is when he said, I'm going to call in all the big shots from the healthcare companies and say, we're going to do this with you or without you. You're making too much. I loved that idea, but that's where it ended. Then he met with the oil guys. I'm telling you, the midterms are going to be about the cost of living. No matter how much we're trying to distract, I don't care how many Greenlands there are. It could be Australia next that he says he wants. The midterms are going to be about the reality of people's wallets in this country, Jess. That's what it's going to be about.
Yeah, and by the way, just focusing on that for a second, if you talk about the wins of the president, I mean, I think there are certain things objectively you can say. The Middle East, right? You could talk about GDP. Closing the southern border. I mean, you had a graphic up in the difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. One thing that you've been vocal about is the idea of military in the cities. Now, I think there's a difference between obviously what we talk about is, having a hard line on immigration and making sure that the criminals in this country are extricated as possible. I want to play you a piece from Katie's interview where she talked about using the military to police cities. And let's take a listen and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Take a look at Washington, D.C. As you know better than anybody, it was very, very unsafe a year and a half ago, because now it's a year, so I have to go a little more than a year ago. But it was a very, very unsafe place, and now it's totally safe.
By the way, I just have to tell you something. I had a friend who just moved to D.C., okay? This guy is as far on the left as you could possibly imagine. He goes, you know what? I like that the military's there. That's what he said. He goes, I feel safer. So curious your thoughts on when the president talks about, and I just spoke to Katie about the idea of potentially the Insurrection Act being used in Minnesota. Your thoughts on
everybody wants to be safe.
Yeah.
You're a new dad. The idea of the safety of that kid is everything to you. That is not a partisan issue. It's about how you do it. The idea of the specter of military being used, forget about in the violation of the fancy phrase, posse comitatus, the nonchalance of talking about the Insurrection Act, as if it's even a close call in Minnesota, is a little frightening, not just to somebody who's, a lawyer, but as a citizen. America doesn't do that. We don't do military as might makes right because we don't like the nature of protests. Washington, D.C. is not safer because National Guards were on the street. That's not what it was. There was a whole strategy going on down there. And the presence, of course, matters, but at what price? You really want military all over the streets? You really want the law to change? You really want it in Minnesota? What do you think is going to happen when they get on the ground?
I'll tell you, if there's more episodes like what happened in that church, they're going to have more support for that. I'll tell you that.
But listen, I think you're right. But is that leadership? Is caving to what the most fearful people, the most angry people want, is that leadership? And look, I think that I had the leader of that protest, one of the organizers, Nikema Armstrong, on the show last night.
Oh, I saw.
And I gave her a full and fair hearing. I don't believe that they were invited in the way she suggests. Certainly the preacher didn't intimate that in his comments. A lot of people there seemed really scared by it. I think that it is an open legal question, but that doesn't mean that the military is the right call. I believe that we are, everything that we've talked about tonight and everything that you're going to talk about tonight is about how extreme you want to be. This president is really comfortable being extreme. I don't know that the country is.
Before I talk about a new venture that you have, and I think it's incredibly exciting in case people don't know, just focusing on the military for a second, we are also living in a very different day and age. His comments regarding Iran, I think were fascinating tonight, where basically he said if certain circumstances are met and he got instructions, he would wipe Iran basically off the face of the planet. Now, this is a situation where military force was used to oust Maduro, strikes on Iranian nuclear sites earlier this year. When you hear that, I mean, what do you think the plan may be? Because as the situation is getting worse there, and you're seeing the death toll, and obviously some of the numbers we can't accurately report given some of the limitations, but you know, there is talk about whether or not he'll impose military strikes there. What did you see it as?
The idea of plan doesn't work for me. I don't think he has a plan. I don't think he has a strategy. I think he's more about tactics. He's about reflexive reaction. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's off. Iran, to me, I'll tell you what worries me about Iran. Obviously, you have the people's cause there. What worries me about Iran is that I don't want to be Iran. When you look at the history of that country, they went down this road of extremism. They used to be a very heterogeneous, open, cosmopolitan society. Some people referred to it as like the Paris of the Middle East. What happened? Extremism, fundamentalism, and then these ayatollahs came in from like Britain. You know, they're not Iranian, and they came in and took over. I feel that we're seeing some of the shoots of the same type of fundamentalism in our country. As the fringes continue to dominate our politics, we're getting more and more extreme. We're talking openly and casually about whether or not the military should be brought into Minnesota.
I mean, you made the point on your show that the numbers say one thing, it's the feeling in this country that's really bothering you. And by the way, I love talking to you. And now if I want to talk to you more, do I have to call into your new SiriusXM radio show? Because you got that. It just launched again on Sirius in the mornings, right?
Yes. 7 and 9, drive time, very important. People are setting the table for themselves. I think that in this media environment, unfortunately, you can't be one and done anymore. I'm sorry, Jesse, you're going to have more jobs.
Apparently,
you really have to find a way to compete with these people who are putting content out 5 seconds. You know, remember the old expression that a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth can put its pants on? That's like 10 times as true now.
It's true.
Most of what I deal with during the day is either asking one of my producers, is this real? Is this real? Did he really say this? Did this really happen? And I want to be more of a consistent presence for people, just like you do. Same guy, different time.
Yeah, I actually believe the AI photos that came out today of Victoria Beckham dancing at her son's wedding. I didn't know either, but this is what.
Hey, listen, that letter from Trump to the head of Denmark, I thought it was fake.
Yeah, I know.
I said, hold on, I'm not falling for this. My producer was like, well, you better. He wrote it.
Well, best of luck. Listen, thank you so much for coming on. Who doesn't want a little more Chris Cuomo in their lives in the morning? So congratulations. I'm really, really happy.
Congratulations to you. I'm happy to be part of your family.
Thank you, sir. Good seeing you. Appreciate it. All right. And by the way, watch Cuomo weeknights at 8 Eastern here on NewsNation.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.